Deborah, I wanted to begin by asking you, how long have you been a teacher? Let's start with your career.
Well, I've been a teacher in a lot of different ways. Um, I taught for a few years, 3 years before I did some other work, working with troubled teens, and then I stayed home and was with my own kids and homeschooled them for 14 years.
Wow.
Yeah, all three of them through middle school. And then this is my 11th year teaching here at Harrisonburg City Public Schools as middle school teacher. Yeah.
So you've been teaching in different forms for a long time. I would imagine you're passionate about it, which is why you do it. And I like when I'm talking with teachers to ask that question because I think it helps people understand why the issues we're about to talk about are so important. Now, you have been involved in a legal matter involving this issue of gender and pronouns, and I want to break this all down. Let's just start, Deborah, from your perspective, when this started to become an issue for you as a teacher, when you realized that you were going to have to do something about it to protect yourself.
Well, a little over 3 years ago, we were given a training that told us as a staff, and this training was given to all staff and all personnel within the school district, that we would have to ask students for their what they wanted to be called and what pronoun they preferred. And then we had to always refer to them that way. And then we had to also not or never tell parents what was going on in the school if they were being spoken to with these pronouns in any way, shape, or form. So that was the beginning of it. And that was a little over 3 years ago. And I knew when I heard that training, I basically went back to my office, my classroom, and wrote down some thoughts. I still have the paper, and I just wrote, I can't lie. I'm not going to lie to kids, and I'm not going to lie to parents.
Well, and I think this is something that school districts are grappling with all over the country. The Supreme Court, in a dissent, we recently saw that there are up to 11 or 1,200 school districts where policies like the third part of what you described, where this is being concealed from parents or not shared with them, where that is already going on all over the country. And so this is a major issue. Vincent, just to come to you for a minute here, and then I want to get back into your story, Deborah. I mean, you've heard many cases. You guys at ADF have dealt with cases like this. What goes through your mind as an attorney when you hear what she just described as a policy that is required of teachers?
Well, I mean, schools can't force teachers to keep important information from parents. That's the message from this case and what we've pushed in other cases. You mentioned the Wisconsin case, and we're hoping that it gets more attention, these issues nationally, because it's not isolated to Harrisonburg, Virginia. It's not isolated to any one community. We represent educators across the country who are objecting to these sorts of policies. Ohio, Indiana, all over the place. They're popping up. And it's just pernicious, this idea that schools need to somehow get between parents and their children and make decisions without involving parents about what's best for their kids. And that schools don't have any business doing that, and they don't have any business enlisting teachers and keeping parents in the dark about those important matters.
Well, I mean, you can't give. I had an incident last year where the school, my daughter had a stomach ache. I had to go to the school and physically give her a Pepto-Bismol because we hadn't signed a form that she could take a Pepto-Bismol over the counter, right? And I thought to myself, wow, here we have that kind of dynamic. And I bring that up all the time because you have that protection, right? But yet we have no protection in the other areas like we're talking about. So Deborah, for you, you wrote down those notes. You knew that you couldn't lie. When you made this, it's one thing to say, I can't lie. It's another thing to say, I'm going to join other teachers and we're going to take action to try to protect ourselves and others. That's a big, bold step. What did it take to get you there? Was it difficult? And what were the steps you took?
Well, it was a process, but that process included a lot of prayer and a lot of consideration, and in spending time in prayer, really feeling like God was directing me to do this with my time, that this was important, this was that important, and it was a responsibility that I had to speak up for kids and for families. I'm a parent as well. I have 3 of my own children, and now I have a couple of grandchildren. And I would want to know I would want to know if something this important is happening in their lives in school where they're spending hours and hours every day, and not to have it kept from me. So for me, that was part of the process. And then there was just praying about it and thinking about it, looking at all the other options. How can we possibly make a change without going for a case? And we did some steps, but we really seemed like we needed to go for this case, and that we had some real strong elements that would carry the case.
Well, and let's talk about what would have happened, before you went in. We'll talk about victory and winning and all that. But before we get there, if you did not follow the 3 prongs of what you were asked to do in this training, what could have happened to you and other teachers who wouldn't do those things?
Well, it was definitely an option that there might be some kind of a negative response. I'd say Vince might be able to answer that even better at this point.
Right.
Sure, yeah, Vincent, tell us about that.
Harrisonburg clearly connected these 3 directives with its non-discrimination policy. And the non-discrimination policy says it shall be enforced. And then, if they find a violation, that includes consequences up to termination.
Yeah.
And so these directives are connected with that policy, which had that threat of enforcement up to termination for not following it. And we've seen this happen to teachers before, not in Harrisonburg yet, and hopefully not now based on this settlement you've alluded to. But we also represented Peter Vlaming against the West Point School Board in Virginia. And he was fired for not following similar directives with a high school student. And his case went all the way up to the Virginia Supreme Court, which ruled ultimately in his favor and resulted in a wonderful settlement for him earlier this year. But that said, this is a real threat to teachers like Deb, or it was. Thankfully, Harrisonburg has agreed that it's not going to enforce these in the way that it looked like it would at the outset of this case.
Well, while you're talking about that, Vincent, let's talk about that. And then, Deborah, I want to come into your reaction to this settlement. Obviously, legal action was taken, and I believe you probably would have taken it as far as you needed to win this case. They settled, it sounds like. Talk about their settlement, what that looks like, what is guaranteed. You just sort of alluded to it, but let's dive into it, because I think it's important just to know that had Deborah and others not stood up and done anything, this policy would have continued. And now you have a scenario where you really did win here. So talk a little bit about that, Vincent.
Yeah, so Harrisonburg, as the first piece of this, enacted a new religious accommodations policy that Deb, Chris, and Laura, the 3 teachers we represented in this case, took advantage of. They sought a religious accommodation from the directives you've mentioned to ask pronouns and names, to always use them even when they're inconsistent with sex, and to not tell parents about what's going on in the classroom. So they said, we can't do that consistent with our religious beliefs. And under this new religious accommodation policy, Harrisonburg schools granted them an accommodation that said, we're not requiring you to do those things. And then that was wrapped up in this final order that we agreed to with the school board that says the school board maintains that it doesn't require those. It says we maintain that we don't require teachers to use pronouns that are inconsistent with sex, and we don't require teachers to hide or information from parents or lie to parents. And it even goes so far in this language, in this order, to say that Harrisonburg Public Schools doesn't support hiding information from parents or deceiving parents. So it's a clear statement from the school district that it's not requiring them to do these things, and it's not requiring them to violate their religious beliefs.
So Deborah, I want to come back to you on this, because you mentioned prayer. I imagine you're a Christian and your faith, guides what you do in everything you do. And that is the case for Christians who are truly following their faith. When you made the decision, and feel free to comment on that, but I want to ask a second part. When you made this decision and you went down this road, how did the other teachers react?
Wow. Yes, I made this decision because I am a Christian, and I followed what I felt was correct, what was right. But other teachers, there are 2 responses. Well, 3. There are the people who are believers as well, who would come to me and speak to me when the case first came out, They would come to me at different times during the 2.5 years and ask me, how is it going? And they came to me the morning after our win. And every time they were very supportive and very positive and very much wanted to know what was going on because it was affecting them or could affect them as well. Or it was
And grateful,
affecting
I
them.
imagine. They were probably grateful,
They
right?
were very grateful. A lot of people have said exactly that they can't thank me enough. Parents have done the same thing. I've gotten a lot of response from parents even since the win, and parents who I haven't seen in a while who are like, I just read this article and I can't believe it, and thank you. The other side of that coin was people who did not agree with this and wanted to have all students be addressed however they wanted to be addressed and to keep it from parents. And those people were very much upset. And some of them spoke to me. Very few of them spoke to me. Most of them mostly stopped talking to me. And that was hard. That showed up again this past week. Some people who just, they're professional where they'll respond when I say good morning, but it's nothing more than that. But then there's the people who just don't have anything to say. So, but there's definitely two sides of this.
Okay, and this question might be difficult, and it's anecdotal based on your experience. The first two groups, the third group, that's a lot of people, right? Are there more of the first group or more of the second group that you've encountered?
In the building, there's more of the second. In the district, there's more of the second. In life, in every place else, there's more of the first group. It's been an amazing experience to hear from people in so many ways. But in the building, in the school district, in the educational system, there is more of the second group. And if I can add to that, when this policy came out, a number of people who are believers left the school district instead of staying.
Wow. It's interesting. And I asked you that question because I think there's a sense that there's a problem in education, right? That there are a lot of people in this second group, but there are a lot of people in the first two, and look, you're in a place, I live in New York, right? So you would assume this is just par for the course in New York. California, New York, you're not going to get, very far if you try to challenge some of these things. At least that's the thought people have, right?
Right.
But it's a little disturbing to think that there could be more in that second group. And I think it lends itself to that question of why is this something that is brewing in education? I mean, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I would love to hear.
Well, it comes down from the training of teachers. And where does that start? And so you see a lot of teachers who come out of institutions, universities and such that are very much along the same lines. And so I see that within the educational system. I saw it in college, I saw it in universities, and now I'm seeing it in high school and now middle school. And I know it's in elementary school because we had an elementary school teacher on our case, one of the plaintiffs.
Vincent, now that there's been this win and this settlement, what are you hoping to see happen? Because this is a national issue. This is not just a Virginia issue, and this is happening everywhere. What do you hope to see happen next in the sense of, here's a win, how can this be replicated to maybe at some point create a national policy that prevents these sorts of things?
Well, we'll continue bringing lawsuits when the opportunity arises, and we have others pending. As I mentioned, we represent educators in, say Ohio, Indiana, where we're actively litigating cases about similar policies and practices. And so that is a piece of it. Another piece of it is awareness of what teachers' rights are in these situations, making sure that results like this one, the word gets out on them so that teachers know that the Constitution has their back in these situations. And I think it's important, too, that it be highlighted as to parental involvement in particular, that, it's just common sense that kids are going to do better when their parents are involved, but making sure people know that there's a growing body of scientific evidence that supports that common sense notion. That kids who are going through all kinds of experiences in adolescence, that they're just going to have better outcomes in the rest of their lives when their parents are looped into these situations. So I think it's giving people the confidence to know the Constitution's on their side, common sense is on their side, and science is on their side. That parents need to be kept in the loop by schools when stuff like this is going on in kids' lives.
Absolutely. Final question for you, Deb. What would you say to other teachers out there, people who are afraid? There are policies like this that are creeping up in their schools, and they're looking at the options you were looking at, and they're afraid to take action. They don't know what to do. They're stuck. What would you say to them to encourage them in this moment?
Don't give up, because there are protections and there is a path forward. Thankfully, ADF, Alliance Defending Freedom, has created some of that. There are others as well, but there is a path forward for those of us who believe that this is wrong to stay in our profession that we are so often passionate about doing, passionate about being with kids and supporting families, and we don't have to stop that. It may not be comfortable at all times, but things that are really worth it may mean that we may have to be uncomfortable once in a while, but it is so worth it. I am so glad I did this. I can't tell you how glad I am I did this.
Well, I appreciate you breaking it all down, both of you, helping us understand it's an important story, and appreciate your boldness. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much, Billy.